think the sales motion looks different as you maybe approach younger generations. Like take a referral, even with referrals, I don't think they work the same. It's like somebody who's under 40 gets a referral. They're still not just going to come talk to you. They're going to go check out your website first, surf whatever digital presence you have, probably bring up ChatGPT and ask an LLM about you, honestly.
Sure.
And the digital presence needs to be out there. It's almost like they're going to need some kind of digital reinforcement to even believe in the referral.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast. On this episode of the show, Dan Zitting, CEO of Nitrogen Wealth, formerly Riskalyze, is with me for a conversation that just might reshape the way you interact with prospective clients and your existing clients. One thing that really jumped out to me from this conversation with Dan was his observation about how the way financial consumers make their decision about selecting a financial advisor and how that's evolved over the years. And as Dan and I discussed, many individual advisors and firms haven't yet made the adjustments necessary to win their business. And that might explain why the industry is experiencing such slow organic growth. But have no fear. We also discuss the solution, and Dan has some fantastic and actionable insights to share on the matter. Now, before we get to the conversation with Dan, please do make sure you take a moment to subscribe to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic or a guest for the show, hit me up. I'm basically at Mike Langford everywhere on the internet, or you can shoot us an email, podcast@finservmarketing.com. Okay, let's jump into the conversation with Dan Zitting. Well, Dan Zitting, so wonderful to see you. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's I'm glad we're finally able to do this, Mike.
I'm so pumped. It's so interesting when you know of somebody who you haven't met in person. You've been excited to chat with them. I'm talking about me on my angle. Maybe you were excited to meet me. Like I'm sitting there, I'm so excited because I had Aaron Klein on this podcast and another podcast. We did a live show at an RIA Labs event type deal at one point in time. And, he had been hinting, we're going to change the name. This big stuff's coming. But literally the last time I had him on the show was, mere month or two before he changed the name. So I'm so excited that we get, and then of course he may announce his new CEO. So here we go. I'm excited that we actually finally get to hang out.
Yeah, it's two interesting events to follow in my new job. One, following the name change from what was a relatively legendary name in the industry from Riskalyze, and then of course to follow Mr. Klein, who's a sort of a personality legend in his own right. So
yeah, I love it. So that is always tough, right? It's kind of like being Tim Cook following Steve Jobs a little bit, and they relative scale. Let's not blow Aaron's head up too much, right? He's a nice guy. By the way, all jokes aside, he's one of the most approachable, just easy hang guys I've ever got to. I like people like that, just no pretentiousness. Just he'll reply to his. Always gets back to me. I've never sent him an email or anything like that where he doesn't reply relatively quickly. So it's great. Good dude. Good.
Indeed.
You just mentioned that relatively legendary name. I think that's the way you said it. I use the term household name. Riskalyze is still is a household name, and every once in a while I hear people they still drop Riskalyze. So I thought maybe kind of we'll talk a little bit about that. Why nitrogen? How did this come about? What was the impetus?
Yeah. I think it was before my time that the name actually changed, but the foundational thing was, I think the name was a little bit of, to some extent, a victim of its own success. It was so tightly associated with this risk tolerance questionnaire and this ability, this capability to analyze a person's risk tolerance and match their portfolio, that it's sort of understated, or I think we felt like at the time that it didn't fully capture what all nitrogen could bring to the table for advisors, which is what led to the name change. And we moved to nitrogen on the premise of really the foundational benefit to our core customer, the advisor, is better growth, and nitrogen being associated with, it makes fertilizer helps things grow. It goes into making bombs, explosive, whatever. But that was the thing, was to say, hey, we can help. What we do offers a lot more benefits than just capturing risk tolerance. That was the underlying principle.
I love it. It is a really cool, by the way, if anyone who's listening or watching hasn't gone to the Nitrogen website and checked out everything, branding is awesome, really on point, crisp, clean. It does absolutely flow. And everything you're talking about, like there, right? Like of being aligned with an advisor growing his or her business, or a firm growing their business, all perfectly in line there. Love it. So one of the fun things about talking with you in the prep call, but just in general, is you're an outsider to this industry. You're not native to wealth management. You got to wear it proudly, right on the chest. Right? You're like, hey, I'm new. I got a fresh perspective and so forth. And it's funny. I've had a few CEOs recently who have been like new hires into a company. That's always a fun and exciting challenge and opportunity. But then when somebody's brand new in the industry, particularly this industry, more so than a lot of others, you probably see this. You meet a lot of lifers in this business. I mean, I used to work at Fidelity, right? And the number of people that worked at Fidelity who had been there for 20, 30 years or whatever.
It is easily the most tight-knit industry I've worked in, for sure.
It's got to be, right? Like, other than like, your typical union jobs, your police officers and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what other industry has like the longest tenured. And it's not even just tenured in the industry. Like, dude, some of these firms, people are there. Like, no. Nothing. And this bureaucracy and all that type of stuff that comes with it, because, hey, you're on my turf. I need to get my sign off before this thing happens. But anyways, during our prep call, you briefly mentioned that one of the things that being a software tech guy instead of a wealth industry vet is it allows you to see like just how much friction is in the daily life of an advisor. And so I wonder if you could unpack that a bit and then maybe share some of the things that you've learned in your early days, or relatively early days, at Nitrogen and your fresh set of eyes in the space.
So, first of all, I'd say, I'm from outside the industry, but I like to say I'm a recovering CPA. I'm actually an accountant by training originally, if you can believe that. So I understand the or appreciation for sort of the type of profession.
Yeah.
And to your point, like maybe akin to accountants a bit, like what I really appreciate about being in wealth tech, in wealth management, is prior to this, I was selling very enterprise software. So it was definitely same sort of kind of on the vibe of compliance oriented, heavy financial aspects, that sort of thing. But we sold it to Coca-Cola and Johnson and Johnson. And when you sell software to a company like that, there's one person way up here at the top of the org chart that buys it, and everybody down here has to use it, whether they like it or not, kind of a thing. And what I appreciate about wealth management is, like, since advisors in large part are kind of their own, usually are pretty much their own boss.
Yeah.
Is by virtue of that, like, all of our users really, really care about how good the tech is, and they change if it doesn't eliminate friction, help them make money, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really fun to spend time with our customers and sort of feel the passion for making the tech stack better and removing friction from their day, of which there is still a lot left, even despite, I feel like the advisor wealth tech stack has come a long way, clearly, in the last 5-10 years.
I love that you brought that up, to the fact that adoption isn't kind of a single point, right? So I've been in I've worked with and worked for SaaS-based solutions for this space before, and adoption's always the hurdle, right? Like, especially if you're selling it, like you sell into the broker dealer. The broker dealer says, "This is great. This is blessed. You can talk to our advisors, and they'll be wonderful users of your service." Now you get the double sale. You got to go talk to the advisors and get the advisors to buy the thing, right? Because the broker dealer is not going to pay for all of it. They might subsidize it, offer a deal or whatever, but it's going to be the advisor who uses it pays for it. And so, but then there's like, okay, this sounds great. I'll use it. But you continuously need to make sure they're actually using it and getting value out of it. Because like you said, like when renewal comes at the end of the year, they might be, or whatever their term is, they might go, it's cool and all, right? The promise was there, but I'm just not using it. And I can't justify clicking the renewal button on this type of thing. We all do that, by the way. We do that in our personal lives as well. We have the like, I don't know, I'm not watching anything on Paramount Plus. You know,
yes.
So how does that work? Just from your perspective, like where are the areas of like, I guess, friction or core focus that like you look at to make sure you're constantly, you know, seen as like core value for the advisor?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's two different sides of Dan. There's Dan, software company CEO, which struggles with some of the things you just talked about. Like, hey, we often do have to sell the software 2 or 3 times before we actually get a license. That's tough. That's a lot of sales and marketing money spent, right? But, and to your point, like every one of our users at the end of the day is pretty much the economic buyer of our software. So we have to find, you know, user by user, make sure we have value to see that it renews. Those are sort of interesting from building the best SaaS business we can build, but I absolutely love it from like the perspective of just like my core DNA as a builder. I got into software because I got into it entrepreneurially. I had an itch that needed to be scratched that wasn't out there, figured out sort of bad self-taught coder, but just scratch by to make something that worked. And I fell in love with software, just being a builder and wanting to make something great. And like, that's what I love about wealth management is, hey, you know what? We are accountable to every day going back to what's the value to the user? What's the value to the user? Like, it's not like Coca-Cola where I can go outsell the problem. Right. You convince some executive who's never going to log in and then everybody downstairs has to use it. Not that way at all for us. And so I would say, you know, the whole first year I was at Nitrogen, that was 95% of my focus and our team's focus was just retrenching on what we'd originally built and grew up on, had done a great job. But there's a lot we'd done over the years that had maybe been geared towards helping us approach enterprise and all these sorts of things that were important for the business. But we spent some time really going back to the user. And so being able to take the time to say, how, you know, we measure satisfaction using something called Net Promoter Score. And it's like, how do we drive ourselves towards a world-class Apple-like Net Promoter Score? Really helped us reinvest in the product, reinvent how we built the product. And I'm happy to say we've had some really good progress on that front. So I think our customers, I hope, have appreciated it.
I love that. And by the way, if you go to the Nitrogen Wealth website, you'll see the Net Promoter Score is just like front and center. It's there.
It is very high. Highest I've ever had in software by a mile.
No, but it's right there. Like you're presenting it to the visitor, right? That they see it, which is not something you see all the time. And to me, what that communicates as somebody who's familiar with the Net Promoter Score is like, this is a thing we care about, right? As an organization, we care whether you would recommend us to.
And exactly. For those that don't know what Net Promoter Score is, it's just this simple methodology for evaluating the question, how likely would you be to recommend us to a friend or colleague? I can tell you there is certainly no other metric at Nitrogen that I care about more than that. Like that's the foundation of economic success for sure, right?
And your core audience gets this, right? Because, and we're going to talk about this a little more in the future of this episode, or in the future of the episode, a little while. Let's call it that. We're going to talk about referrals, right? But advisors get this, right? A huge percentage of the advisors you talk to in the world will tell you most of their new business comes from referrals. Well, guess who gives referrals? A promoter. Would you recommend us to a friend or a colleague, right? And so you're basically saying, like, this is how we measure ourselves too, right? This is like what we care about. I suspect, just based on what you were talking before and kind of building on kind of the original question about friction, as a new CEO, I suspect a lot of your time was actually reaching down into these firms and going out and talking to the advisors. I'm sure you've talked to a myriad of them. You go to conferences. I'm sure sometimes it's on the Zooms and what have you. What have been some of like the core frictions that advisors are wrestling with today that maybe they weren't before, right? That they're sharing with you that you're like, okay, we need to solve that new pain point.
Yeah, I feel like if I were to summarize it to the highest level, I feel like they say, I want to spend 90% of my day with clients.
Yeah.
Everything after that is kind of noise. And so continuing to say, the reality is our customers want to spend less time in our software, not more. And we should say that's like, of course, we measure engagement in our software. We want people to be in there more, but in reality, that's not what we want. What we want is more value, less time spent in there. And so I think anywhere today that advisors are filling out forms in software, to me, is no different than it was years ago when they're taking notes and filling out things by hand. Like, that is friction that today needs to exist less and less. And especially as we embrace these everybody's saying the same thing, but these ground shaking AI technologies that enable us to transform what used to be filling out forms to instead just talking and have happening. To use the buzzwords of agentic AI and that sort of thing. So that's our goal, is like, how do we get people out of the software in front of their clients? And then what we, Nitrogen, I think uniquely do is like, we put like this sort of digital, like I say, we're sort of the UI on top of the advisor's advice. Like, we create either proposals and documents, or even better yet, digital experiences that just reinforce what the advisor's saying, but making it look incredibly beautiful, incredibly professional, and incredibly engaging. And that to me is like, I think the more we can create this digital experience that continues to drive in the next generation of investor to taking in the advisor's advice, that's where we'll succeed.
I love it so much. And it's such an astute observation that it's like, yes, we want you using our tool, but we don't want you like banging your head against the wall, like how much work this tool is going to be to use, right? So I think about PowerPoint, right? Great example, right? So, everybody's had to make a presentation, and I'm sure many of the advisors at some point in time when they realize the clients want some visual stuff have sat there in PowerPoint or Microsoft Word or whatever to create a doc. And as you were just saying, like, man, like, wouldn't it be better if somebody who is better at design and report composition and all that type of stuff did it for you, or made it a little bit easier and it had it be a better UI, if you will, a better presentation to the client? How about that onboarding process? A lot of work goes into assessing clients' go back to the original risk tolerance, and are we going to be a good fit for you? Are we going to help you achieve the goals you want within the parameters for like what keeps you sane, right? In terms that relates to your money, can we do that? And the fact that you were thinking that way versus just like, hey, how do we make this, software that is so powerful yet so hard to use, right? Yeah, I see that a lot in this space.
Yes, that's right. And if you know what Nitrogen does, I think, the risk number itself, that's our original core innovation. It's something that is so simple and easy and straightforward to explain to a client. Yet on our side, behind the scenes, it's a massively complicated set of analytics that produce that. But it goes into saying, like, along with the advisor, we do something super complicated, super methodical, mathematical, et cetera, and put it in a really easy to consume package. That's a great kind of quote unquote UI, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
But then the reports that we put it in and the digital experiences we put it in on screen make it even more engaging. But to your point, it's like where I would love to see Nitrogen continue to push from a product standpoint is the risk number, the proposals, those great engaging digital experiences for the end client show up without. In a perfect world, you just have the meetings and all the rest of that stuff comes out afterwards.
Right.
Versus I talk to the client, then I go back and I construct the portfolio and all the things that you have to manually do in the past. So yeah, all that to say, I completely agree. I mean, I think the future is in the minimum UI requirements to the advisor possible, but the most engaging digital UI to bring the client or the prospect into the engagement with the advisor, the better.
I think it's so interesting too, because I think part of this is the nature of the industry, right? You should think about who an advisor is. In most cases, the advisor is not somebody who is like great with graphics, right? They're not great at, presentations and all that type of stuff. They might be great at presenting, right?
Yes.
Because, right. That's a different skill, right? Crafting the presentation versus being the person who can stand up on stage or sit across a table from a couple or whatever. Those are two different skills. They might be great at certain things, but the other things, like a lot of advisors are not particularly great clerical data entry type. Like, it's not where they envision spending their life. And in fact, many of them got their start as salespeople, right? Like they work their ways up, as I say on the show all the time, stockbrokers or some form of insurance agent. They were selling product when they first got started. And then they evolved into this relationship-based advisor style business as we have it today, which is a relatively new incarnation. And so, yeah, it makes sense that they're like, great, I've got these clients. This is awesome. But man, I'm struggling with some of the day-to-day stuff that, like, the expectation is of the new clients, right? What are they looking for, right? And so, it kind of leads me to jump into our next conversation that I want to have, which is during our prep call, you made another observation that you were saying that many advisors might be relying too heavily on referrals. I told you it was coming. And that might be causing them to lose some of their sales muscles, if you will. So I've hit on this topic a couple of times with recent guests. So one was Greg Bogich. I'm not sure if you know him, from Acquire Up, CEO of Acquire Up, who also, by the way, new CEO from outside the industry. Good for him. He uses great analogy. He's like, listen, referrals are like fishing in a stocked pond. He's like, if you're one of the first people there, it's a blast. He's like, but once that fish level gets to a certain level of normalcy, it gets really hard. What he means is basically, hey, look, you've only got so many clients. They're only going to give you so many referrals. Could dry up. So why do you think this large population of human beings who grew up in the industry being sales guys and sales ladies, they were out there just shucking product, we've all seen the movies, start dialing for dollars. They're making a couple hundred phone calls a day on the auto dialer type of stuff. Now they're, I don't know, a little wimpy when it comes to some of them from broadly. They've lost the skill, right? They go and say, why do you think that is? Because organic growth is pretty anemic in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's funny because we had a total parallel in software. We used to sell software perpetually. You bought a license and you owned it. And then we switched to a model where you basically rent a license and you renew it every year. And we went through the same thing of, going to that more sort of subscription model, if you want to call it that, made it so that we became much more consultative and less harshly sales as well. And I think that's a good thing for the benefit of the clients, but sometimes we let that muscle atrophy of the core selling motion. And I would say, I think there's a couple of reasons to think about kind of bringing, I don't know if bringing that back is the right phrase or not, but reasons to exercise that muscle again, and it's for two reasons. One, it's like you said, it's just sort of atrophied. But two, like I think the sales motion looks different as you maybe approach younger generations. And so I think like take a referral, even with referrals, I don't think they work the same. It's like somebody who's under 40 gets a referral, they're still not just going to come talk to you. They're going to go check out your website first, surf whatever digital presence you have, probably bring up ChatGPT and ask an LLM about you, honestly.
Sure.
And the digital presence needs to be out there to like, it's almost like they're going to need some kind of digital reinforcement to even believe in the referral. The other part of that I would say is that they're still not inclined to pick up the phone and have a live conversation. And so I would say, to get the conversation, you actually need to make the cold call. Because it's, if you've made the water warm by reaching out to me, it's a lot easier to call back than it is to call cold for folks who aren't really used to engaging products they procure in that way, if I can put it that way.
No, I'm so frankly grateful. I think it's the right word. I'm actually grateful that you put it that way, because no one else has. I've asked this question. I've talked about like what's going on. Organic growth rate is ridiculously low right now in this industry. Like 75% of all growth is coming from market growth. Many advisors, like close to 40% of advisors, are in net negative growth, right? And there's a bell curve, obviously. But you're the first person who's like, hey, look, the way you sell has changed. The way people are, actually, it's the way people buy has changed.
That's a better characterization. Like the way people buy has changed.
Yeah. But right. Think about yourself. I mean, I'll think about myself. I'm a Gen Xer, right? So the way I buy is different than the old days. Like I'm not necessarily answering cold calls, right? In fact, my phone sends you to voicemail if you're not in my contacts. Right? It's like automatically go to voicemail. Right. I might call you back, right? But I do exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to go to the website. If I have a question, I'm going to see if I can find the answer myself, maybe first. Now, it depends on the importance of it, right? But the importance of like doing business with you forever, like you being in charge of my financial future, right? Kind of a big deal, right? So like you said, I'm going to go check out your website. Me being a video and audio guy, I might go to see like, is there any video of you online?
Totally.
You know what I mean? Have I seen you speak? Can I hear what you sound like before I get in front of you? Type of deal. I love this topic. Are advisors talking to you about this, about, hey, listen, we need, or are you coming, I guess maybe it's both ways. Are you guys talking to advisors about, hey, listen, the way people buy has changed a lot, and you have to support kind of a new way of them discovering you and going through the sales process?
I think that conversation is really just starting to open up between us and our advisors, to be honest.
Yeah.
Historically, what Nitrogen has done is we're the tool that makes you look amazing once you've gotten something kind of started, gotten a conversation started. I think the opportunity is to push a lot more than that, to say, that's still actually what Nitrogen will do. It's just, the thing is that the conversation has started way before where you think it did.
Yeah.
Like historically, if you think the conversation started when somebody made the referral called up, the conversation started. That's not where it started. It started when somebody in your town, again, asked ChatGPT, tell me about who's around in my town that can give me financial advice. Or, hey, my cousin up the street told me about this guy, Mike Langford. Let me see a little bit about what I can learn about him online. Like that conversation is well down the path by the time they've ever called you, and you've probably lost 80% of the funnel by then already, if there's not enough digital presence for them to get a sense of who you are. So like you said there, I mean, video, audio, website presence, etc. I mean, all of those things I think are important, and again are things that will pick up so that so that the LLM agents on the internet are recommending you just like your clients are. But I'd pour onto that again to say, I actually think, like, people say cold calling doesn't work because people don't answer the phone. It's true. People don't answer the phone. But when you leave a voicemail, it's one more of those digital presence points, like all the other ones we just discussed. So my argument would be is that cold calling totally works because it makes
100%.
It makes it easier. It makes it easier for me to call back.
Yeah, like if I called you and you never heard from me and say, "Hey, Dan, it's Mike Langford. I'm just calling from Finster Marketing. We talk to you about producing a podcast, whatever, that type of stuff." Yeah, you might not answer. You might get the voicemail, and then I could follow up with an email or a text or whatever, saying, "Hey, just left your VM. Not sure if I know your voicemail is just like mine, probably a little stacked, type of stuff, but love to chat with you about it." Blah 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 blah. Right. So you're showing a little bit of personality. You're showing some good follow up, that type of stuff.
And then I think somebody like us comes in there to say, what we do is inject some value point into that conversation, so it's not just purely cold. So it's like, hey, maybe you don't know me, but if you're thinking about investments, I find 80% of my clients are invested for too much risk. Here's a really easy way to figure out what your risk number is, and it's like that simple thing we found in upfront marketing campaigns. Well, it gives the client something safe to engage with beyond, instead of just having a live conversation, but then also pours a bunch of data back to the advisor. If they take, for example, our risk questionnaire and they get their risk number, now you've got a whole bunch of data about them as well for when you do have the first conversation to make it impactful.
Funny.
And have something to talk about.
You just hit on you hit on something. You do this for a living. But you hit on something and it got into my brain a way that I hadn't thought about it before. The number one reason why somebody hires a financial advisor is because they're worried about risk. It's got to be up there. The number one reason, right? Because think about it.
Very high. We would suggest, yeah.
Well, if you think about there's lots of ability to DIY, right? That's okay. How do I build a balanced portfolio or whatever? How do I invest? What, right? But as we talked about, like when Aaron was on the show, he talked about clients work with advisors because they want comfort and confidence in their financial journey, right? And I've always said,
right.
People,
am I going to be okay?
Yeah, confidence. I want to know, right? Well, what's underneath confidence? Do I understand the risks of the road, right? When you get into your car, you ask yourself, like, what's my confidence that I get where I'm going safely, or I don't run out of gas, or I get there on time. Like you're going through, you don't think about it as risk, but there is like, hey, do I have enough time to get there on time, right? If not, do I have to make some adjustments? Do I have to take the highway versus the back roads? It sounds so silly as an analogy, but we all do that. So when you're working with an advisor, the reason why you're deciding to work with Dan is because, hey man, I'm worried that I'm going to screw this up or I can't do this. I need somebody, right, to help me here. Maybe I just answered this question, but like, why do you think this comfort and confidence are so core to the advisor-client relationship? And are you seeing advisors getting that? I guess is what I'm saying. Like, do you think they're picking up on what we're laying down?
I think they, I mean, they totally intuitively get that. I guess the question is like, what are we doing to really turn that into business?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they're having a conversation with clients when that conversation's already there. But like, I'll give you an example. Like, I'll take my parents. I have divorced parents in their mid-70s. They are still both with separate financial advisors sitting around wondering, am I going to be okay? Am I doing am I doing the right things? And, I would say, calling my mom once a quarter has helped with that over the years. But I can tell you, like, when I was taking this job, I had her do the risk question. Like, as I was exploring getting into this role, I wanted to explore the product. I tried this thing with my mom, and she instantly gets this risk number thing. Like, it was a way to just translate the advice in a way she could understand it, and more importantly, put it in a really professional package where it sits on her desk and she can go look at it when they go crazy on Fox News about whatever the day's disaster is. and so like, I felt like that really helped. Well, like, why? And maybe that's a little bit promotional of our software, but in general, whether it's us or anybody else, like why that advisor hasn't like boiled down the conversation with her to something like that and gives her something that sits on her desk that she can go back to and check and go, we're on track. I don't know. And then to your earlier point, why they don't in turn say, hey, Dan, we work with your mom. What we discovered when her risk number was this. Yeah. Have you talked to her about it? And have you ever done it yourself? They've actually never once reached out to me for estate planning or any other sort of reason. And to be quite candid, I'm the client they'd actually want, not my mom.
Right. Yeah.
So why that's the case, I have absolutely no idea.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because, to me, like I had this as our action step for I was like, oh, I'm going to close out the podcast with this, but let's do it now.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. No. I love it. I love what this, the whole point, like just so behind the scenes of like how the sausage is made, if you will, how the show is made. I always send out like a high level outline of some conversation starters. And I love the fact that sometimes we get out of order because I can talk. I love talking. So here we go. No, but that's the whole point. We want this to be entertaining. It's not just supposed to be a drudgery for somebody to listen to or watch. So I was thinking of this. I'm glad you shared that story of your parents and the financial advisor not reaching out to the children or especially the adult children of their clients. There's a lot of opportunity there. And we've been talking about next gen a lot for a long time, but like advisors, action step, you want to grow your business. Next time you talk to your clients, go, hey, let's talk about your adult children. If they have them, what do they do for a living? You find out that one of your clients' children is a CEO of a large company. Like maybe, hey, let's make sure Dan's in the loop on what's happening with your financial plan. So at a minimum, let's make sure he knows what we're working on and all that type of stuff, because chances are he's in the estate plan there. And I heard the other one, oh God, I'm blanking on her. Her first name is Beatrice, and I'll put it in the show notes. She was finding the other thing is the opposite. If you have younger clients, sometimes that's a path to the older clients.
Oh, yeah.
The parents, sure. Right? So they're finding that they're working with a lot of younger people. And then sometimes the younger people, they deal a lot of immigrants, right? And so the first generation immigrants, the parents, oftentimes have no financial relationship, no formal financial relationship with an advisor, but a lot of them like own businesses and things like that.
Yeah.
Your action step advisors, ask what's going on.
Well, it is. It's funny, right? I mean, look, you can imagine by virtue of my job, you get reached out to a lot. I mean, I live in downtown New York City. There's probably 700 advisors in a 5-block area of where I live in Manhattan. Right. But like, if this person reached out to me and said, your mom trusts me?
Yeah.
Wait, like what better asset would there be? What better marketing asset is there than like, your mom loves me?
Right. Mom thinks I'm awesome.
Or I did this for your mom, right? Like,
unless your mom really annoys you, then you're like, well, yes, you're out the list. No, I love my mom. This is great. No, it's such at a minimum involve, right? Like reach out, like say, hey, like here's some things we work and we think they're pretty unique and so forth. Want to let you know your mom's in good hands and all that type of jazz.
Feeling I might hear from somebody after this.
Somebody's gonna be like, hey, guess what? Or we're gonna get a bunch of mom jokes in the By the way, from our generation, mom jokes are great. I love it. Let them fly. Aim at me, leave Dan alone. His mom might be watching this episode. She doesn't need to hear that. This is great. You know, it is so funny though. See, I had Felipe Taves from Taves Asset Management on recently, and he wrote a book called Behavioral Portfolio. So we covered a whole bunch of stuff, and like one of his key things that he was talking about is that advisors are doing kind of a poor job, sort of on purpose, not like maliciously, but on purpose, like in a way, like of really informing their clients about the actual risks of investing, right? So that they're being overly rosy in the way that they talk to their clients about what's the worst case scenarios here. And his point was not to be fear mongering, you know what I mean? Not to be like, we should be scaring the crap out of our clients. It's more to be real with them. Like, hey, here are some of the actual worst case scenarios that happen. Like, this is what it looked like in the Great Depression, how long things took to get back, right? This is how long this happened after 9/11 or the .com crash. Like, you go through, like, here's some of the worst case deals. Like, here's what happens when stagflation and other craziness happens in the world. We've got this, right? Based on your plan. Like, now, if we talk about, like, here's worst case, you could actually take some fear away. Like, I know what to do, or I know that my advisors are steady hand at the wheel here. And I think it's so wonderful that, Nitrogen has a tool that's able to kind of capture all because it's not just risk. Like, okay, how do you handle when the market goes down by 10%? There's more to risk than just that, right? But historically, a lot of advisors have talked about risk tolerance in that way. Like, are you okay? Would you be nervous if your portfolio was down 10%? Right? It's more, right?
Yeah. And so I say this, not, I obviously say this because I do love our product, but I wasn't the one that originally built it. I joined because it really resonated with me. And there were, I would say maybe two things in particular that you touched on there that really resonated for me. And the first was like the way our product approaches risk. And the reason I think it fits with a really thoughtful financial advisor is because it says, look, people aren't stereotypes.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a broad, like, I log into my 401k plan in the last, in any of my prior companies. And when I log into my 401k plan, it says, how old are you? And I say how old I am. And it says, therefore you are moderate aggressive growth. And so it's like, well, actually, it turns out when you look at our data, of which, by the way, we have literally millions of investor answered risk questionnaires, it turns out that those stereotypes are completely false. There is not that much more likelihood that somebody who is 25 is a risk number 80, i.e. really aggressive, than people who are 75. It turns out people are individuals. And like, I think, good financial advice as well as our tool helps capture that. And it turns out, in fact, that we find, across the board, it's like 80% of portfolios are overly aggressive relative to the way we analyze risk, regardless of your age. So I like that. Like, hey, first of all, like, humans aren't stereotypes. And then it's the same thing on the security side. Like, just because a security is a stock does not necessarily mean it's way lower risk than a bond, right? Yeah. Which is an obvious statement to say, but we do sort of tend to treat it that, the security class does not dictate the actual risk of the security. So I like getting rid of those stereotypes. And then the other side is, back to your original question, is just being able to say, like, in a very professional and easy to digest package, like, you said this about risk, so we put you in this investment portfolio, and here's what has happened through all of these different events, whether it's 2008 or the Great Depression or the run-up of 2019 and 2020. Like, here's what happened in those. So if that is happening now and you're still inside of these parameters, guess what? The plan we set is working.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't feel like it. Yeah. And that I think really resonated for me.
I love it. It's so funny. I love the fact you pointed out the fact that just because somebody's young, some of these, like, just kind of, you're young, you can afford to take more risk. Psychologically, maybe not.
That's right.
Psychologically, it's, what's really funny about it? I always find these easy analogies when you think about kids. And we have two separate kids, like, usually they have some different personalities and so forth. When you see my son, you'd think that dude's more the risk taker, right? Because he's more adventurous socially. He's the athlete. When he was little, the dude was like, always crashing into stuff, just had one speed and it was 90 miles an hour type of kid, right? My daughter, however, you'd catch her like climbing stuff, but very meticulously, planning out everywhere the next hand is going to go. She was just very puzzly, she's very tactile with stuff. and it's somewhat nervous about things. Like if you tried to pick her up and throw her up in the air, like I'd throw my son, and she'd be like, nope, don't do that ever again. However, when you look at the way she's approaching her scholastic life, if you will, way more adventurous, right? She's on the robotics team. She does the marching band and concert band. She's in student government. She's doing all these, she's involved in a lot of things, and in part because she's a planner. She's a researcher, right? She goes out and finds out, like as an example, she wants to go to an Ivy League school. So she's like, I found out if I'm in this, there's a 7% chance, more higher likelihood that you get accepted if you have that. So she's doing all this stuff, and so she's taking risks, if you will, but it's more methodical. It's more, so she's got all the, like a nitrogen would do, is let me provide the data points for making sure that this plan works.
Because she is so methodical and so mathematical, she may very well be a risk number 82, where your son is going, he may be a great skydiver one day, but with my money, I don't really understand this, and I am not. He is I'm a risk 23.
You know what's kind of funny about that? He is kind of like that with his money, right? He's not a big spender. Like he likes stuff, right? But he's kind of a minimalist dude, right? And he's watching his money. He's like, I don't know if I'm about to spend that kind of money on this. So he's okay with like, I'm going to hold on to that, or he's waiting for dad to buy it for him. I don't know that type of stuff, but he's kind of, and that's funny, the way to put it.
Yeah. We all talk about our risk number at work, but our CFO is a good example. Here's a dude that is, he's our CFO. I mean, super financially minded, reasonably young guy, like all of that sort of stuff. But he's built with a different risk tolerance than me, and he has a very, very low risk number, as we say. That's and funny. So he's a super conservative guy. And it's like, to your point, it's like, ironically, another just total individual, super financially savvy, no interest in a high risk stock portfolio, and any advisor that suggests such wouldn't resonate with him at all.
I love it. It's so funny. It's just honestly, I keep coming back to that comfort and confidence thing. I always call it the sleep at night factor. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do for your client, right? They want to be able to know that, hey, I'm going to work, or whatever I'm doing, my future is good. I feel good about where I'm at, right? Like that, I can retire.
Yeah, and no matter, and like I will feel, I believe they will feel more that way because they feel like the advisor understands them.
Yeah,
will make them much more confident than, oh, that advisor, I got the smartest advisor in the world who knows more about stock picking than anybody else. Like, I think that's completely different. And I think that only intensifies as you kind of come down the generational ladder, that comfort comes from, you understand me, not you are so incredibly smart.
Yeah, that's 100%. It's funny, even on the what you and I might consider the crazy risk side, of the cryptos and digital asset type of stuff. You're gonna have some clients who are like, what one of my emotional triggers is? FOMO. Like, I don't want to feel like I've been okay, great. So you start talking about those types of things and build it into the plan. Like, okay, look, we're gonna make sure you have some exposure to some of these exciting new things. But we're not going to be overexposed, because your risk number, you tell me, is this. I get you got some FOMO here. So let's make sure we are delicate in the way we allocate things. I know we're coming up against our time together, but I did want to get your take. Obviously, nitrogen and most other technology tools now are leaning into using AI tools because it's so valuable. Earlier, we talked about kind of bringing this full circle. We talked about friction and taking friction out of the advisor's day. Where are some of the best near-term opportunities you see for AI to improve the advisor's workflow and their client experiences in terms of removing that friction? Are you seeing anything? You're working on anything?
Yeah. I think there's no doubt that the ability to conduct better meetings and get better outcomes out of meetings is driving a huge change right now, right? There's a ton of talk about companies that are doing kind of AI. I think note-taking from meetings with AI now is a commodity thing, but like turning that into what happens next, what my next action items, all that sort of stuff out of meetings. automating compliance from it, all that sort of stuff is a good example of, I think, where this starts, that everybody's already getting way on board with. So we think that's really important. We're really excited about that. And we've got some really exciting stuff coming, both that we're building and in partnerships, to make, given that we tend to be the tip of the spear of the most important meeting. When you're originally meeting with that either prospect or client about their goals and where they're going. So we're super excited about that and turning that into a richer meeting based on things we can already figure out about the client and about the advisor and about what's going on, making it a richer meeting through meeting prep, as well as the outcomes of what happened afterwards. But then we also think like there's just a huge opportunity to have, in effect, kind of an AI research assistant, as it were, kind of a co-pilot for the advisor that is both, how do I gather more intel about where about this client or where I want to take this client, as well as can the co-pilot help drive research of new products that may better balance this portfolio? What are other advisors like me recommending in this kind of scenario, that sort of thing. So that just all aspects of time spent on research, I think is a big kind of co-piloting opportunity. And then lastly, like I said, I think in general, like in a lot of ways, it's like, I'd just like to almost get rid of the interface of all software and not have to have you interact with software user interface. And instead, it's sort of like, I go about doing my work. The software does its work through chat prompts and meeting notes and whatever to do the work and say, hey, is this the kind of report or the kind of digital experience that you want to put in front of the client or prospect that you think will drive a deeper relationship, deeper engagement?
I love that. I tell you what, I would love to be using a solution. I use ChatGPT very similar to the way I talk to human beings, like the way I email somebody. Like if I were to email you, like, hey Dan, can you do me a favor and go whatever, reach out to, so like I talk to it that way. I know I don't need to be polite to ChatGPT.
I'm totally a please and thank you.
I
with
say
the LLMs.
Please and thank you. Could you? I ask, could you please look up all that type of stuff? But I guess it's a habit, because what I don't want to do is get out of the habit of typing politely and then have myself blast off an email to a real human being as if so I figure like the slippery slope is but I think that's a genius idea, by the way. Imagine a piece of software that's like, hey, we are 100% built chat prompt style. Like you don't even have to figure out where the menus are and do all this type of stuff. Type in what you want. We'll show you. And then you're like, if you need changes, type in the changes you like. We'll show you again. That type of stuff. How awesome is that? That's a cool idea.
Yeah. And we're not there yet, obviously, but I think that's where it's headed. And look, in the meantime, where a company like us feels great is, we've been around for 12 years. Yeah. If you've been using this a long time, we know a lot about you. We know a lot about how you construct portfolios. We know a lot about how you work with your clients. Yeah. We have perhaps years of kind of check-ins of sentiment from your clients and how they react. So we think we're going to be a great partner, a great AI kind of co-pilot for you in empowering you to work with clients that way and feel like it's you.
I tell you, there's so much value in just being like having that 30,000 foot view. Like, hey, listen, we've worked with thousands of advisors, which means tens, if not hundreds of thousands of clients. We have visibility into lots of data points and actions, and we can absolutely help you. This is fantastic. Okay, so nitrogenwealth.com is the website. Dan Zitting on LinkedIn. Where else are you guys hanging out? Is there anything else we need to follow along? We should tell the audience, like, go here, check out more stuff.
We, unfortunately, anybody who's ever been, I think will reinforce that we put on a heck of a good conference every year.
Nice.
We unfortunately had to move it out of the fall this year, so it'll be in February next year, but the Fearless Investing Summit, it's an incredible conference, a really good time, and really rich on content. So definitely check out the Fearless Investing Summit. And, otherwise it's hard to not run into us. We're at we're at most of the industry conferences, and like you said, nitrogenwealth.com, and all around. We'd love to talk with you.
Perfect. Awesome stuff. We'll make sure we get all that stuff linked up in the show notes. Thanks for coming on the show, Dan.
Amazing. Well, likewise, Mike. Thanks a ton for having me.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge props to my man, Dan Zitting, for coming on the show. I mean, he really uncorked it today, didn't he? Awesome, awesome stuff. By the way, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you head over to the Nitrogen Wealth Fearless Investing Summit. I've got that linked up in the show notes. Make sure you register early. You're not going to want to miss that conference. It looks like a baller time. All right. That's all I have for you today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, as I mentioned at the top of the show. And, be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Financial Advisor Podcast. See ya. Bye.